Okay, I'm letting everyone in.
Okay. Yeah, there's some links and things in the slides that'll be helpful for people to have them, I expect.
Yeah. And also, just to be clear again, this is being recorded. Is that okay?
Sure, I'll watch my language.
Awesome. So yeah, welcome everyone to our third event of this intro to blockchain, a technical intro. Great if you're just getting started with smart contracts and coding on Solidity or on the Ethereum network. But also if you're completely new, Lawrence gave us a great introduction to all things blockchain, the meaning of consensus and trust in the first two sessions. But now we have Tom, also from XtraP, who's going to take us through this third session. And once again, feel free to ask questions throughout. If there's anything in the chat, I'll try and pick it up, because I'm sure Tom will be in the zone trying to pass on all the knowledge he has. So once again, thank you, everyone. It looks like the Zoom link worked this week, which is great. We had some technical difficulties with the hyperlink, but once again, yeah, massive thank you, Tom, for doing this on a cold, dark November. We really appreciate you coming down.
Cool.
And yeah, I'll leave it over to you.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much indeed, Brandon. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this cold, dark evening. Hope you've got your warm tea or hot chocolate, whatever it is. You've got to keep you warm. So yeah, for the next couple of hours, I'll hopefully give everyone a nice rounded understanding of how to build a decentralized application using a couple of technologies that you may or may not have heard of before. I've tried to write this in a nice way so that you can follow the steps and get to the end. There are links in the presentation for the files too, so I'll share the slides afterwards and Brandon will distribute that. And the links give you the project files as well as kind of the core files. So whether you're kind of beginner, medium or expert, you should be able to take it in and run with it and start to build on and start to do your own cool things with it. So yeah, here we go. So yeah, Tom Dwyer, as Brandon has introduced me, work for XtraP.io. As I said, it's an Oxford-based consultancy providing many things blockchain related, but many blockchain solutions, sort of security audits, DApp development as well. Yeah, we focus a lot on like Ethereum blockchain, private blockchains, develop a lot of smart contracts. And so this is really a practical hands-on insider of what we get up to, I guess. So some useful prior knowledge to this, I can recommend sort of Solidity and Web3.js. Solidity is like the language used for writing smart contracts. Web3.js is the JavaScript library to interact with smart contracts via Web3. Then we have Remix and MetaMask. So Remix is online development environment, and it's used for a variety of things, but mainly to construct smart contracts, and it gives you some nice. You also have MetaMask, which is the browser plugin where it allows you to send and receive tokens using Web3. And we have NodeJS and JavaScript. So NodeJS is it's a framework for JavaScript, and it's very well supported in terms of APIs and plugins and bits and bobs like this. So this is what we're going to be using today, Node.js. And we have HTML, which is markup language used for all the websites that you visit. And Express is a Node.js framework that allows you to develop websites using Node.js. So all of the functionality you can plug into that. Finally, we have IPFS, which is interplanetary file storage. If you haven't heard of this, it's cool. Don't worry, I'm going to speak a little bit about it and also introduce it as part of the DApp. It's a very cool technology, which allows you to store data in a decentralized fashion. So the outline of this presentation, First of all, we're going to review smart contracts and Solidity using Remix. Then we're going to talk about some development and testing tools. Then we're actually going to go on to writing a smart contract using Remix. Then going on to building a DApp that interacts with smart contracts. Then we're going to talk about storing and retrieving data using IPFS and some common problems and their solutions. These are things which I've commonly come across. And then some closing comments. I'm going to see if I can grab the Q&A or something, just so I don't miss anything, if anyone's asking anything. And each of these topics should last between sort of 10 and 20 minutes each. So diving into the first topic, so review of smart contracts and Solidity using Remix. So as I said before, Remix is an online environment that allows development, debugging, and deployment of smart contracts. You don't necessarily need it for this workshop, but I use it regularly to develop smart contracts, and I highly recommend it as a tool. It's free to use, and it's got some useful tricks inside. It's worth pointing out that the contracts that you use in Remix, they're only stored in your browser history. So if you go to a different computer, or if you wipe your browser history or something like that, then you'll unfortunately lose all of your smart contracts. So it's important to back up anything important if you do any work on Remix. So going through what we have on the screen here, we have the environment as shown on the screen. If you go on to remix.ethereum.org, and you have some tabs on the left-hand side. The first one, File Explorer, which shows you the smart contracts that you have in your workspace. And at the bottom, you have a terminal, which is you will recognize from other integrated development environments. Next down, you have the compiler. This is used to generate the ABI for the smart contract, and it interacts with the EVM, which is the Ethereum virtual machine, on whatever blockchain it is that you're using. It's important to point out the Solidity version. So this is something which changes quite regularly at the moment. You can see it's in 0.7, so it's not in version 1 yet. There are breaking changes from version to version. So you've got to make sure that, one, it matches up with the version you've stated in the header of your Solidity code, and two, that it matches the functionality that you expect it to. Then we have some compile options at the bottom. Generally, you can leave them as they are, but yeah, you can auto compile if you don't want to press compile each time. Yeah, and there's a compile button which compiles the selected contract. Then we have the deploy button. So this actually deploys it onto the blockchain that you want. And in this case, yeah, it's using an account as highlighted there, and the environment JavaScript virtual machine. So it's using the local environment. You can also load a compiled contract from an address. So when you compile a contract, you get an address for that contract, and you can load this contract up here if you have it in your development environment. So it means that you can start to see the functionalities that it has, that particular contract has, if you have the contract address already. And the last tab at the bottom is plugins. Quite simply, yeah, you can add different plugins. There's a variety of things you can have. The ones that are shown on screen, so deploy and run transactions and the Solidity compiler are the ones that are by default. And then I tend to also add in Solidity static analysis. As it states, it checks the contract code for security vulnerabilities and bad practices. So it just makes sure you're not doing some silly mistakes. So going on to some actual smart contract code. So we have here at the top, you can see the Solidity version, which is defined at the top of the code. As I said, all of this code is included in a link in this presentation. So don't worry about sort of jotting it down now. You can get a copy of it all. Then going down, we actually have the contract name. So this one is called storage. We have a variable declaration. So here we have a uint256. And then we have it's a function. It's a function called store, and it accepts one type of integer. You went 256. It's publicly accessible, which means that if you are interacting with the smart contract, then you can see this function. And it sets the variable number to the input argument num. And there's another publicly accessible function called retrieve, and it returns the state of that number for you, quite simply. There are some notes about what Solidity is, which I'll briefly run through. So they're event-driven, they're immutable function containers that run on several blockchains. There are various different functions, some of them which I've gone through here, some of them which I'll go through in a more complex smart contract. There are things like getters and setters, which you will have come across with other languages. And you can do things like emit states, and Lawrence has gone through quite a few of these functions with you already. You can have protected functions as well, so you can secure who can interact with the smart contract, and various things like constructors, so you can define the owner of a smart contract when the smart contract gets deployed initially. You can also do some simple array manipulation on data storage, which is contained within the smart contract. So some development and testing tools. These are the ones that I use day to day, really. So VS Code, which is a wonderful tool written by Microsoft, but don't hold it against it. Yeah, it's free to download, free to use. And these are the recommended, well, the plugins that I use, I can recommend. HTML preview, which allows you to preview the HTML page that you are working on. It has some nice functions like live update. So as soon as you save the HTML, then you can see it updating your web browser. Prettier code formatter, which is very useful for getting all of the white spaces lined up, and it makes it nice and easy to see if you've got a bracket missing or if you've got a function out of place. And Solidity, as the name implies, it's for the Solidity language, and it ensures, well, it highlights the code. So it makes it much easier to develop because it highlights the keywords in the code for you. Live server is another thing which is very useful. Again, it's for showing off the HTML page when you're developing. So NodeJS and NPM, these are the two kind of core frameworks, I guess you could call them, used to write in NodeJS. So NPM is Node Package Manager, and that's what you use to install different functions and packages that you'll be able to find online and that you require for various different projects. Ganache is it's a local blockchain, brilliant for developing. It means that you can write your smart contracts, run your local blockchain on your computer, and quickly test without costing any money your functions. And the block time is very short as well, so it doesn't take 15 seconds or anything like that for a transaction to go through. So again, a brilliant development tool. And Remix, we've already gone through that briefly, but yeah, online smart contract development environment. So we're going to now talk about creating a more complex smart contract using Remix. So the purpose of the contract is to allow someone to track unpaid invoices. This could be used at a retail outlet where customers don't always pay immediately, such as a garage or a pub or a bar, something like that. The contract will record a list of items with the time of sale and the cost. And it will be related back to an account name as well, so you kind of know the customer that's bought each item, and yeah, the cost of it there. We're going to leverage an internal method to, well, we're going to be able to get the list of items as well from the contract. So we'll be able to see the tab of someone, be able to see what's outstanding. We'll also be able to clear that list. Say if someone pays off their tab, then we'll be able to get rid of it all. We'll be able to search for and remove a specific item in a list. And the file in the files that we're going to be distributed is customer tab.sol. So here we have the first few lines of that solve file. We have the contract license at the top, which basically you need to include, otherwise it has a warning. If you're not using it if you're using it for development, it's perfectly fine to have it unlicensed. We have the Solidity version. Here it's 0.7.0. Solidity is on at least 0.7.1 now. So a little heads up. We have the ABI encoder. This is simply for converting the smart contract into ABI bytecode to be used in the EVM. And we have here the function contract name, customer tab. So going down that file, going down the contract file, in the next few lines, we have a constructor statement. This is used to enable access control over some functions. So in this particular instance, whoever deploys the contract is the owner of it. And we can use that owner's ID to restrict certain functions, such as clearing the tab. You don't want a customer to be able to clear their own tab. You would only want the person who's in control of that tab to do so. We also have a variable declaration for that variable. So it's an address, and that's a type, and we're calling it owner. And here we have a modifier. It changes the body of a function each time a contract is called, in this instance for verification. So as I said, this can be referenced back for a function where you want to limit who can call that function. So now we go into some data storage and retrieval. So where do we actually store the customers tab? We have a definition of an array to be stored. It's a struct called sale. And we also have a mapping of that struct to customer to sales. Now in that array, in that struct, we have three data types. We have a time of sale. So this records when something was sold in the uint 256. We also have the item ID, which is a string, and the price of that in uint 64. I've chosen uint 64 for price because I wanted it to be able to be used in Satoshis, like Bitcoin Satoshis. So you need quite a lot of numbers for that. Now we have a couple more features being introduced called event. These are called when something happens inside the contract, and it allows an external program to listen when that event has happened and to be push notified of a change. So this is very useful if you have a different function running somewhere else. It can watch a contract on the blockchain, and when something happens, say something is bought or sold, then you can have an event happening after it to notify of you. So we have two events in. The first one is to notify of an item being added to the tab. And we see those three data types. And we have also address indexed customer pub key at the bottom. Now, when you listen out for an event, you may want to filter. And that may be because you don't want to know when everybody has bought something. You may only want to know when a particular person has bought something or sold something. And if you want to filter on something on this data type, then you need to use this keyword indexed, otherwise you won't be able to. We have a very similar event called item paid, and it's just an event to notify when an item is removed from a tab. So now we are storing some information. So this is a function to add some data to that array, to that struct inside the smart contract. So we have the function name, add sale for customer, and its inputs. We then have an external declaration. So it means that somebody from outside the smart contract can call that function. And we have 4 lines here, 4 things that are happening inside of this function. So first of all, it will look up the customer tab to find the customer tab if it exists. If there isn't one that exists, then it will generate one on the fly. It will generate a timestamp. This is so that it can simplify the contract call, and instead of requiring a timestamp being sent to it. It just generates it inside the smart contract. It then pushes that item to the tab, so it adds it onto that struct. And it also emits event under item sold. So it then notifies anybody who's listening that this item at this time, at that price, for that customer is sold. And just a reminder, this is the event that we went through a couple of slides back. So this is what's called upon when this function is called. So it triggers that event. Now, if we want to retrieve information, this function allows us to do this, and it allows us to retrieve the entire tab for a particular customer. So again, we have the function name and input, the input being the customer pub key. So we want to look up a particular customer. Again, it's external, and we are declaring a return type here. So it's in memory, and it's a mapping for an address. So we are looking up that mapping that we went through a few slides ago for that customer pub key, and it will return us back the list of unpaid items in that tab. Say someone's paid off the whole tab and you want to clear it, then this function allows that to happen. So if you wanted to reset the tab, again, you have your function name, you have your input, which is a customer pub key. So it's the person who you want to clear the tab. And it's external again, because it's available outside the smart contract for people to call upon. And we are limiting it to only owner. So this means that only the contract owner can call this function. So there's a few steps here. First off, we're going to grab that data again for that customer. So we're going to look up any results for that customer pub key from the internal storage. Then we're going to check if any items exist. We're going to loop through all those items and delete them one by one. And then we're going to eventually emit an item saying that this has been cleared. And you cannot simply delete, not yet at least, you cannot simply delete an array in Solidity. So this is how you do that. And as you can probably imagine, if you're going through a massive array, it's quite computationally expensive to do this. So those 4 features there I've just run through. And again, this is the event that is called item paid when this happens. So it just calls with those inputs, the timestamp, the star there to indicate all. The price is set at 0 just because it's everything, and then the customer pub key is sent out as well. So if we wanted to remove a single item from an array instead of the whole thing, this kind of goes through how to do that. So we have the function, the name, the input, and again, we are restricting it to only owner. So we don't want someone to be able to remove an item from their own tab. We have a few steps in this. So first off, we're going to grab the data for that customer, and we're going to count how many items are in that. We're going to loop through those items, and then we're going to store that item in memory. This allows us to then reference that item against the item ID that we've input to this contract call and check if it matches. If it does match, so if it's the same item, then we're going to emit something to say that it's been paid for. We're going to reorder the array because we've taken we're going to take something out of it. So we need to make sure that there's not a gap into it. We're going to finally remove that item, and then we're going to stop the loop so we don't just carry on looping through. And there's the event on the right-hand side to indicate what item was sold and for whom. So a quick summary of what we've just gone through there for creating a smart contract. So we have the constructor, which is used to set the contract owner to limit functionality. We had a definition of an array to be stored in a struct. We had a mapping of customer ID to their tab, which allows us to look up their tab. We have a couple of events, emit events, when an item is added or removed. And we can also add an item against a public key. So we can add an item to their tab. We can get a list of items for a particular custom pub key. We can delete all items from a customer's tab, and we can remove a single item from a customer's tab. Now, going on to building kind of the code and the DApp or the DApp, never know how to pronounce it, that interacts with the smart contract. So we're going to, first of all, set up the project folder. So this includes Node.js and its dependencies. We will configure Truffle. Truffle is used for sort of compiling and migrating smart contracts on the command line. I'm going to write some functions to interact with the smart contract. So as we've gone through the contract already, you should be familiar with these. So we're going to have a function to add an item, a function to get the tab for a customer, to reset the tab, so clear all items from a particular array, remove a particular item, so search through an array and pop something off of that array. And we've got the watch. So this is when you want to watch for an event being emitted. And we're going to build a front end with Express. So when you get these slides, those two links there will give you access to either the core files if you wanted to kind of construct it all yourself and get a bit more hands-on. If you wanted to simply extract the files and run them, then there's a complete project available as well. So setting up the project folder, when you do have those files, so we need to initialize a project folder using this npm init -y. The -y simply means yes to default, so it goes through a couple of questions, and you can fill them out, the details later in I can't remember the project configuration file now. Yeah, I can't remember now. But you can fill out things like the project name and the license and other bits and bobs later on. You'll then need to install some dependencies. So the dependencies required are Express. This is the framework for generating the HTML files or building the HTML files. Body parser is required to process requests between the HTML and the Node.js backend. Truffle, which is used for smart contract compilation, and it links, deploys contract as well, and it does some binary management for the API bytecode. They need Web3 dependency. These provide the methods for interacting with the smart contract. IPFS, which is coming after the first step, which is the library for interacting with the IPFS network. And this groups IPFS data from a particular point, from a CID, and it brings it into a single object. So it's nice and easy to pull back a bit of text and show it on screen. Next, you'll need to type in truffle init. This initializes truffle in the app directory. Expect to see unbox successful suite. It's safe to proceed if you receive the warning. Yeah, I haven't got that written here, but yeah, if you see a warning about this directory is not empty, it's okay. And you'll need to modify one or a couple of things really. So in the truffle-config.js file, you'll need to add in these lines here. So around line 45, this is so truffle can communicate with Ganache. You'll also need to make sure that the Solidity version matches. So we're using 0.7.0 here. Yeah, it needs to match exactly, otherwise it will complain. Now, this is how your project directory should look, with a couple of missing files, which we'll add in. So the files that are provided with this, you'll need to copy app.js into the top level. You need to copy the contract into contracts. You need to copy deploy contracts into migrations, and copy the source folder with all of the files inside of it into the top level. and finally copy views into the top level. So this is the HTML file, the page that you'll see in your web browser. Yeah, and the folder tree should look like this. I've omitted the node modules folder, which can get quite large. So next we need to compile and migrate the contract. Ganache makes it very easy to get up and running. So once you've downloaded it and installed it, you need to open it up and hit quick start. Yeah, there is another new workspace function in there. Sorry, I'll go back a sec. New workspace is a fairly new and welcome option. So generally when you start up Ganache, it starts a new blockchain and it erases all of the previous transactions. Arjun, yes, the slides will be shared at the end, don't worry. Yeah, new workspace allows, new workspace allows you to sort of open and save a workspace, and then you can open that up again if you come back onto Ganache. If you don't use that, then you will erase all of the transactions before, which is usually fine. But if you're doing a development project over a number of days or a number of weeks, then you will lose all of your transactions that have happened, which can get quite annoying. So this is a very welcome feature. So the main window, as you can see there, it shows a list of funded accounts, all with 100 ETH, which is lovely. And they're available to be used for development. The first account listed is called on by Truffle. So using that Truffle config, and it's used by Truffle for migrating contracts. And so therefore it is the owner account. It is the one that is in control of those functions where we restrict it. We have up at the top highlighted there the network settings for Truffle, and they should match what's in the Truffle config. You can get the private key for each account by clicking this key. And that's what you see when you click private key. So if you need to import it into MetaMask, for example, then that's the private key that you'll use. So next up, we need to compile and migrate the smart contract. So from the parent directory, you will need to type in Truffle compile, and it will generate a couple of files for you. This will also, that's all it does actually for the moment. And then Truffle migrate, what will happen then is that it will put them onto the blockchain and return the public key. So this is, or the address rather. This is where the contract is deployed to. So you will need this to interact with it using the NodeJS app. Now we're going to go on to writing some functions to interact with the smart contract. So this, as I said, these files, all this code is available for you. I will run through each line so to give you to describe what it does. So you can either write it out, you can modify it, or you can just grab the files and run it. So this is the contents of web3funds.js. So we have some dependencies here, some that we've installed. We should also reference the RPC server, the same as was on Ganache. Then we need to reference our customer tab contract code. So we need to point it to that customer tab that was made available when compiling the contract using Truffle. This is the address of the smart contract. So in the previous slide, when I said you need to copy that when you migrate it, then that's what needs to be pasted in here. And this allows you to find the contract on the blockchain. And then we need to generate a contract instance using this line. So we're using the ABI, which is the customer tab that's been migrated, and also the address. And then I've added in a timestamp parser. This is simply a bit of fun just to convert the Unix timestamp to something that's human readable, which is quite useful to copy and paste it to other projects as well. So now we're going on to, we're going to go further down that file in web3funds.js. So here we have the owner, public and private keys copied from Ganache. So this is the first entry that you will see in Ganache. Then what we need to do is add the owner address to the local wallet of Web3 using those credentials. And we're going to set a high limit for gas. Now, gas, if you're not aware, it's used for powering smart contracts. Think of it as petrol in a car, drives the car. You use it and it's burned, it's gone. But it's required to interact with the blockchain. Going down that file, we have an async function. Asynchronous functions are those which don't happen instantaneously, maybe take a little while to respond. And it's called add item, and it accepts 3 parameters. We have customer pub key, we have item ID and price. As the function name says, add item, so we're going to add an item to this customer pub keys tab. And the function, the core of the function is here. So we're going to submit those parameters, those input parameters, to a function, add sale for customer, which is in the smart contract. Once it's been sent and there's a receipt from the blockchain, then we'll put the response in a JSON object and return it back to the sender as a confirmation that it's been received. And we're going to return that response. It's worth pointing out that the variable used to hold that response is initialized outside of the try catch and await statements. If you don't do this, then it won't respond a value. So be careful with that. Now we're going to, well, this is the function to remove an item. So we're going to go through this. So again, we have it's an asynchronous function, so it doesn't happen instantaneously. It accepts 2 parameters, the customer pub key and the item ID. So we can look up the item ID for that customer and remove it from their list, from their tab. Now the core of the function is submitting those parameters to the function item paid by customer in the smart contract. And again, when there's a receipt, we're going to put it into a JSON object and return the JSON object to the front end. Next up, we have get tab. Now this lets you search for somebody's tab and return the whole thing, so you can see what's outstanding. Again, asynchronous function, and it accepts just 1 parameter. We're now going to, well, for the core function, it's in the wait, so that's the asynchronous part. We're going to submit to get tab for customer, the customer pub key, and when we get a response, we're going to put that response into the response and return it to the front end. One thing I missed out on the previous slide is removing, I don't really want to go back, but I'm going to go back, sorry. This is a protected function, I should point out. This will only work if it's being sent by the address, the admin address, if you like, the owner address. Yeah, sorry for missing that point out. Again, such as this is another protective function, reset tab. So only the owner will be able to call this function. It's async function called reset tab, and it accepts 1 parameter. We're going to await for the response, and we're going to submit to the smart contract the function call reset tab with the customer pub key. That's it. And this function allows us to track what happens. So if something's sold or paid for, but in this case, just when it's added. So we have a function. It's not asynchronous because it's going on in the background. It's called track added, accepts one parameter, so that customer pub key again. So we just want to know when one particular customer has had something added to their tab. So when the function item sold happens, when that event is emitted, and the parameter customer pub key matches cust pub, matches that input argument, then we're going to add the custom field to the event and send to the console. So it simply writes to the console when something happens. Now, this is a similar function as the one before, but instead of tracking anything that's sold or added, it tracks everything. It's not able, I don't think it's able yet, or it wasn't able to be filtered on a particular customer pub key. And that functionality may come in with Web3.js, but yeah, filter doesn't work at the moment. So previously we could check if a particular customer's item was sold. This doesn't let you have that feature. You can write your own custom if statement, quite easy to do, but you will just be passing all of that data each time. So the function track all accepts a customer pub key if you did want to filter it, and it reacts to all events from that smart contract. When there is that event, it will set a field depending on whether it's sold or being paid for, and it will write it to the console, just simply letting you know that something's happened. You could also take that data, you could send it to something else, you could highlight it, but this is a very simple way just to confirm that a transaction has happened. Now going on to the Express front end, this is the, I'm not a front end developer per se, so this is a very simple front end for you guys to use and modify and change, and it does what it says in the tin, I guess. So we have 3 main file types for Node.js Express. We have HTML files that provide the page layout and the interaction, similar to making any old website. We have some JavaScript files that provide the logic to the front end, and some CSS files that add a little bit of page styling to this. This is the flow of Express. I tried to lay it out in a way to help explain what is happening when you click on a button and how it interacts with the different files as well. So it starts with app.js. That's the top level function, if you like, that you run when running the project. And it routes the browser to index.html, points it to there. Once it's there, it waits for a user input. So it shows you the screen that was shown before, and it just waits for something to happen. When a button is clicked, then a call is sent to this file, ajaxweb3.js. I haven't gone through Ajax at the moment. I'll speak about it in a moment, but it's another bit of code that helps you interact on a website. So then it routes that information to app.js, back to app.js, I should say. That is then routed to web3 fun.js. This handles a function call. So this is where the smart contract functions exist. And this is where you actually interact with the smart contract and get the data, send the data. That's then sent all the way back to app.js, which routes it back to ajaxweb3.js. This Ajax function then modifies the page elements. And finally, the HTML is updated on screen. I know it looks very convoluted. I could have maybe somehow laid it out better. I'm sure someone else can lay it out much better. But this is where the data goes. So if you're confused about what the files do and what is happening, then this is a step-by-step, as clear as I could make it at least. So once you have the project, once you have all of the code, you can run it using node app.js on the terminal. And then you'll get a couple of things on the terminal. So Web3 funds loaded when your functions are loaded in one file, and you'll have a site available at. And if you click on this, you can jump on it into your browser and you will see a very similar page. At this point, you can start to play around with it. So you can start to generate some transactions with the smart contract. You can put in a customer pub key. So you can either use the pub key of of the owner, so the top one in Ganache, or you can use the second one down and you know, play around with having different people, different public keys. All of these functions, they're sent via the admin, kind of the contract owner, so you'll be able to do all of the functions. So if you type in like, item ID, I've written there packet of crisps, price 123, and you can click add item to tab, and then that will give you back that transaction hash, hopefully when that transaction goes through. So again, yeah, enter some information into the form, click add item to tab, and it will add an item to your tab and store it on Solidity on the smart contract. If there are any errors, they will be showing up in console, or as well, if you're running it in your web browser, if you hit F12, there'll be a console tab in there, so you'll be able to see if there's some errors that are happening. It should respond with OK, simply OK. If anything has gone wrong, then it will tell you where it's gone wrong. So again, this is the transaction hash that's returned by web3funds.js from the blockchain. This is that console that I just mentioned. So it's very useful for debugging. It gives you some nice feedback. As I said, it should just give you OK if stuff goes well. If it doesn't go well, then you'll get some errors. You can also start to play around with the other buttons. So we have remove item from a tab. So if you search for packet of crisps and then hit remove item from tab, it should remove it from the tab. And if you click list items on tab, it will show you everything that's there. Everything is referenced with the date time, which is converted into human readable format, and it shows the price as well. So you can see the speed of it. You can start to get a feel with how this runs. You can click it too fast. You can sort of spam the blockchain with too many contract calls, and you get some funny errors then. This is a very simple example app, and it can get tricked quite easily if you just spam it with hundreds of button clicks, mouse clicks. But it should only take less than a second for it to happen. If you are running on the real blockchain with this, then yeah, it will take a lot longer. It will take sort of 15 seconds for the Ethereum blockchain at the moment, if you've got your gas fees right. This is just saying again, if you are on the web page, press F12, gets console up. So that console log, the events that are emitted, this is what is shown into the console. So it will not just show you the transaction hash, but it will also indicate on the console from the event that's being emitted by the smart contract what's happened. You could, if you wanted, separate this function out to a different application if you wanted. There's no need to keep it in the same app. And it allows you to then start to plug in and have a completely separate standalone function, which is listing out for events. So a quick summary of building this DApp. So we have a NodeJS project with Express front end. We have an interface now, which allows querying, writing, and removing data from the smart contract. And we have an interface that displays relevant data. I apologize, I didn't go deeply into Ajax, which is quite a core part of this application. There are plenty of guides about Ajax. In brief, I would say that it allows you to update a website without refreshing the page. So it's used commonly on websites. If you click a button on the page and something changes without the whole page refreshing, then it's probably using Ajax. And it allows contract calls, as we're using here, and it makes it a nicer user experience. I've written the code with tons of comments. So if there's anything, any functions that are happening there, then it should be explained. If there's not, then please do get in touch and I'll happily explain what it's doing and why it's doing it. Yeah, there's loads of guides around for things like Ajax. It's not a new technology. It's not a new term. So there's plenty of tutorials and things around online for that. Now we're going to go on to storing and retrieving data using IPFS. Now, as I said, IPFS, interplanetary file storage. I'll describe it a little bit further in a second. File system, sorry. We need those other two libraries for this. So JS IPFS, I think that's just IPFS as I had it before, and it all as well. So these are the two libraries that are used for these functions. So just to go over what IPFS is. So it's a decentralized storing platform. It's a protocol, peer-to-peer network for storing and sharing data in a distributed file system. IPFS uses content addressing to uniquely identify each file in a global namespace connecting all computing devices. What that means is content addressing is it creates a hash of each file, so a unique fingerprint of each file. So instead of referencing a file by its name, it references it by the contents of that file. So you know that when you retrieve that file from IPFS, that it is what you expect it to be. It allows some other cool features as well, such as you won't have duplication of data, since you know that there's the same file existing in multiple places. There's no need to have that anymore. You know that that file content is the same as that file content, so you can reduce the requirement of data storage on your network. You can store data locally, so you can play about with it on your local machine, or you can use it online. It's completely free to use, but there are services that people offer where you can store data on their systems for a very small fee. You can have a single IPFS node, or you can have a cluster of nodes. There is sort of inbuilt features and functionalities in IPFS to build a cluster. So you don't need to write your own thing for that. There's software available by the developers of IPFS. There's a link, ipfs.io. There's a ton of tutorials, there's a ton of information around it. It's pretty stable. I've used it for quite a while, and it's an alternative for storing data. It's a very nice system. The developers are cool if you want to get in touch with them as well. You may have seen their Filecoin project as well, which I'll mention in a second. Pinned data. So I want to speak about this because generally when you store stuff on IPFS, it will not be stored there forever unless you pin it. It will be stored there temporarily. You will have a finite amount of space that is set aside by the IPFS code. Say on a terabyte hard drive or something like that, you might have 10 gigabytes set aside for IPFS data. That means that if you exceed 10 gigabytes of data, then any old files will fall off and any new files will take their place. If you want to store data long term, then you can pin data, and that just means that it doesn't get deleted and will get kind of kept at the back of the queue for being pushed off. We then have Filecoin. This is the sustainable ecosystem developed by the guys at IPFS. So IPFS, as I said, is free for you to use. If you wanted to store it in a professional manner, then you can use Filecoin now, which has just been released. Their main change just been released. They have some cool statistics, such as storing a gigabyte is something like 5% the cost of storing it on AWS. It uses some very clever tricks to make sure that your data isn't getting deleted by the guys that are storing it. They have to verify that they're still keeping your data, and they get penalized if they do delete your data. So to integrate IPFS into the project, we need to update the project folder. We need to put in a couple of files. So another AJAX file to interact with the IPFS functions, and also IPFS funds. And these are the direct functions that we're using to interact with IPFS. And put both those files into the source folder. So the IPFS funds file, I'm going to go through the different bits of code for that. So these are the file dependencies that we need, IPFS, of course, and all, which is the thing which aggregates the data from the storage in one chunk. We have another async function called IPFS init, and we have a try catch statement inside there. We are going to create a local IPFS node on your desktop, and it creates a node in your browser. So it means that you can very quickly get up and running using IPFS, but it only exists for the time that the browser is running, basically. We then return that browser instance to the calling function. The next function is add. So if we want to add data to IPFS, what we want to do is send it that node that we just created and the data that we want to add to IPFS. When we add that data to IPFS, it automatically hashes that data using SHA-256, and it will return the CID, which is the content identifier, to the calling function. So then if we want to get some data from IPFS, then we can return, or we can send, sorry, IPFS get, again, that node instance and the CID. So the CID that we previously returned from the function, we're going to request to get that data. So it's an async function. We want to get a CID using our node. First of all, we're going to grab that data. So in the data, in data, as I've called it there, const data, we're going to concatenate all of the data from that CID from the node. And we're going to convert it to a string and return it to the calling function. So I said we're going to convert it to a string just so we can see what's going on. Now at the bottom of the web interface, you'll see the IPFS section. And we'll be able to do a few things such as add data to IPFS and retrieve data to IPFS. You might notice there's a lack of a remove function from this, simply because it's not a common thing to remove data from IPFS. As I said, you get a kind of a 10 gigabyte or a finite amount of space from IPFS that it kind of just falls off the edge like a big circular buffer. You can delete data from IPFS, but as I said, it's generally not that common a thing to do. So if you add data to IPFS, you can type in some text, hit add to IPFS, and it would return you back the CID from that function. The output will then be able to be used to retrieve that data. That CID, that unique identifier, is kind of like the lookup for that file. So to run this again, we want to stop the function, put in those new files, and run the app again. So NodeApp.js. And yeah, write something in there, which is the data that you're going to be storing. At the moment, it's just text in there, but you can modify the code to add something more interesting if you like. So a quick summary of what we've just been through. So we have been able to add and view data on IPFS using the Express app. Now I'll go through some common problems and their solutions. These are, it's quite wordy, this slide. I'm sorry for that. Lots of problems listed. And yeah, these are just things that I've come across that people may get tripped up on. So if you have simply a not returning value error in your console log, so when you're running when you're running the app and you've hit F12 and you've got the console up on the side, if you get a not returning value, then it could be a number of reasons. So first off, you might want to initialize, well, you may not have initialized the variable outside of the try catch statement. So as I said before, you want to initialize the variable, fill that variable in within the try catch, and then return it afterwards. It's also important to have this require, at the top of app.js. This simply allows you to, well, it gives you the functions to pass the data backwards and forwards between the app. If you don't have this, then it won't know what you're asking, and it won't be able to send you back the data. If you have a Node.js error, but it's functioning as expected, you check the data are being returned, are passed correctly. So whether it's JSON or string, in this example, I was converting the data to a JSON object and returning it back as a JSON object. And that's what's expected in the Ajax code. If you have some migration issues in Truffle, so check smart contract name is exactly the same as the contained function name. So it's quite picky of that, otherwise it doesn't know what it's trying to migrate. Check there's a migrations file for all contracts. And check, I've mentioned this before, but check the Truffle config version matches the Solidity version. So in the top of in the header of the Solidity file, make sure that value is the same as in Truffle config. If you cannot access your contract, so if the contract deploys but is left inaccessible, sometimes it's happened that you need to make a transaction to make the contract accessible. So in this case, you can use Remix and MetaMask, make a transaction, and then that should make the contract accessible to. Once it is deployed, you try to interact with it. If it doesn't work, you might need to redeploy it again. Check the guest clients are compatible. So if you're using the latest and greatest version of Solidity, it might not match up, especially if you're using a public blockchain or a private blockchain. It might not be compatible with the version of guest that's running. And as the RPC node, and the RPC node is what you're communicating with, it may not be compatible with the version of Solidity. So you may need to drop back to version 0.6.0, for example. Most should be compatible with that. One quick and easy thing to do is just to delete the node modules folder completely and run npm i in the parent directory. This will ensure dependencies are installed properly. Just reinstall everything again. It's quite safe to delete node modules folder. The description of what should be in there is in package.json, so you won't lose anything by deleting that folder. Yeah, sometimes a contract might need to be redeployed. It doesn't matter so much if you're developing, because of course you're not using real money to do so, but yeah, you may need to redeploy it. It is a last resort. Any information will get lost. Any transactions will get lost as well. So yeah, really don't use this unless you have to. If you're trying to filter events and you can't filter them from the smart contract, the field in event must include the indexed keyword. So in the event function of the Solidity file, make sure you've got that indexed before the variable type. So got a question about, so Mo has asked, mentioned that if the node storing the data loses it, the owner will be penalized, and since it removes duplications. Does that mean there is no file replication in IPFS if a node is lost? You wouldn't be able to retrieve your data. So in Filecoin, it's subtly different to IPFS. There's some mechanisms, some incentive mechanisms to ensure that doesn't happen. But yes, unfortunately, if a node goes down that's storing your data on IPFS, then you will lose your data. You can choose to store your data in more than one place. So you can choose to have multiple copies of it. And in that case, it's a bit more safe. And that's recommended if you are going to use something like Filecoin to store your data. Then don't store it with one miner, store it with multiple miners, because there may be something like a flood that happens, or a power cut, or the hard drives could fail simply. So yeah, it is a risk. It is a risk, definitely. So that, yeah, good practice is to store it. Well, they say store data at least 3 times, don't they? So whether you're storing it on your hard drive and 2 times elsewhere, or 3 times on Filecoin, then yeah, you need to duplicate your data. Hope that's okay. Cool, no worries. So if you are struggling with getting the event emitted from the smart contract, then yeah, the index keyword must be included. And also, all events isn't able to be filtered. So it will just give you all of the information when something happens in the smart contract for anyone by anything. So you will have to write your own function to filter out that data before you show it or do something with it. If you get a transaction, not a number, NaN, failed when using MetaMask, clear data in MetaMask. So this is it's a common solution for issues. Again, this is a safe thing to do. It sounds pretty drastic to clear data in MetaMask. All it will do is clear the local transactions in your instance of MetaMask. And check fields in Remix match those in the contract. So if not, Remix might be using a cached copy of an out-of-date contract. So you should copy the contract to Remix and redeploy from there. So yeah, just something maybe different between what's on the blockchain and what Remix is seeing. So closing comments, way ahead of time here, but I've whizzed through it so I can go back over anything that maybe I spoke too quickly about. So we've gone over Truffle, how to use that for migrating and deploying contracts. Gone over Ganache, so how to use that for development. Also spoke about Web3. So yeah, smart contracts aren't limited to one token or even one ecosystem. So don't think you have to use Ethereum. There's plenty of other things out there for you to play around with smart contracts on. Introduced VS Code, as I said, a very powerful development tool. So yeah, highly recommend that. Gone through NodeJS as well. This is basically the code, how it is laid out and how we're programming using JavaScript. Spoke a bit about, well, quite a bit about Solidity and how you can write a smart contract. It's much like JavaScript in its methods, in its form. There are differences, definitely. And as I said before, it is a young language, so there can be broken changes. So be careful if you're changing, if you're simply updating your version to get the best of the best. Double check on the documentation to make sure that there are no broken changes. Also gone through Remix and how to use that for development. Spoken a bit about IPFS, interplanetary file system, and how we can interact with it in a local manner. And we've gone through how to build an app on a line-by-line code basis. Hopefully that's been very clear. But as I said, I'm more than happy to clarify anything that I skipped over or didn't explain properly. And then we've gone through the very wordy slide about debugging and how to fix some common issues. So some closing comments. So further work that you may want to take on if you're using this app as a starting point for your projects. So there is practically no error handling going on apart from what's inbuilt in the code. There could be some things such as if you're putting the price, if you're using something that's not an integer, maybe don't allow that to be submitted. At the moment, it will try and handle some strings or something other than integers in there. It'll cause some errors. And this goes with all of the other fields. There's no error handling. There's no checking at all with what's going on. There's no delays in it either. So you can spam the blockchain with a lot of requests, and this could cause your smart contract to fall over or to get some errors. So it's useful to stop somebody being able to double click a button. So put a short half-a-second delay or second delay on there, or even more, or wait until you've got the receipt from the blockchain in order to reactivate that button again, so they can't send the same transaction twice. We could also allow the contract to receive multiple items in one transaction. So currently we can add in one thing at a time. This is quite an inefficient way of doing it, of calling a smart contract. So you could add in maybe a whole array of things at a time, or like a whole night's or a whole day's transactions in one go. This would be quicker and for you to interact with a smart contract and be a bit cheaper too. There's no password protected features on the app either. So at the moment, the app uses the owner account to send transactions. If somebody gets hold of the app and wants to do some admin-y type things like remove an item or completely clear all items from a customer's tab, they're able to do so. So you could add some password protection onto it. Oops. There's no real-time updates at the moment. So one reason why I was using the console log to give you the event emit is because the framework that is used doesn't allow this. It doesn't allow for waiting for a response other than an asynchronous call. So if you did want to have an update when something has happened outside of the app, then you might want to use something like socket.io, which is again another framework which allows some more features to be integrated into Express. You may want to go completely crazy and integrate Web3 with Bitcoin Lightning. So why not join two blockchains together? This would be something that I'd love to present at another time. Yeah, I really think there's a powerful combination between smart contracts and micropayments in Bitcoin Lightning. So yeah, you can use some calls, some API calls, and integrate some smart contract functionality in with some Bitcoin Lightning payments, things like payment layers or micropayments for streaming media. So as I said, I work for XGP.io with Lawrence, and we're building up a lot of material as we go. So we have community education. This is the site for that. This workshop, the one we've just gone through, is this how to build the app as quickly as possible. We also have a few others there, and Lawrence is going to go through some more tomorrow. So yeah, please do visit and see what there is to play around with and to get educated on the topics. And that's the end of my presentation. So I've really whizzed through that. I could have gone a bit slower perhaps, but if there is anything that I could go through again, I am more than happy to. Yeah, my name's Tom Dwyer, like my email address and the company website, also the company LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn as well if you want to get in touch. Thanks very much.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Tom. Are there any questions from anyone in the chat? Just to reiterate, the slides will be available. And there will be also a recording of this. But yeah, it's one of those where it's quite a lot to go through. So I think if you go through bits in your own time and try and wrestle a bit with the code, then it's a great way to learn, you know, your first bit of DApp or yeah, DApp, however it's said, development.
I'm never too sure. Yeah, during the slides will be sent out, so I'll put them into probably a PowerPoint or PDF or something and send them to Brandon. And then there's links in there for all of the material, as I said, so you can get up and running quite quickly with that, or start to build and develop using the core files.
Yeah, or even if it's a Google Slides and it's just like a shared link to view or something, that works as well.
Cool. Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. One question I had was I wasn't sure, but with VS Code, does it just act as a text editor, or do you also get like a console inside with Solidity?
Sure. So VS Code is basically a text editor at its very core foundation. It's a very fancy text editor, and it's got a ton of different plugins and things you can add onto it and install. Some of those which I've mentioned, some plugins which I use regularly. It has a console as well. So what it allows you to do is write your code in your project. You can see where all of the files are. And then using the console, using the terminal, you can run your code. You can see the printouts. You can have multiple terminals running at the same time. Generally, it's very, very stable. It runs on every operating system, I think, known to man, and very lightweight. Yeah, there's rapid development. Microsoft really pushed to bring out new features, and it's always bringing in things which you haven't thought of, which are useful. Just little things when you're writing code. It's nice to kind of have those additional features in there, which make spotting errors a bit easier, or make like things like missing a bracket can be quite annoying to find, or missing a semicolon. Quite a lot of it is fixed itself. When you hit save, there's quite a lot of error checking, and it will go through and add in a semicolon if it's missing and it thinks you need it. It's very configurable as well, so you can change absolutely everything in it, regardless of again what operating system you're running. It uses a JSON file for its settings, so you can jump in there and change it. And you can share settings between instances as well. So you can log in using your GitHub username.
Oh, wow, okay.
And if you're using it on 2 different computers, then all of the plugins, all of the settings, everything is passed on one to another, which is very, very handy indeed.
Okay, yeah, awesome. So you don't get many people coding Solidity contracts or with like Vim or anything like that.
Lawrence might, I don't know, you'll have to ask him. He's a big advocate of Vim, but I personally no. I try and steer clear of that. It doesn't give you the nice pretty colors of the variables and things. So no, I try and do it with VS Code or Remix. Again, like Remix is awesome for that because it gives you some nice feedback straight away. It gives you feedback on why something isn't working. So you're trying to do a particular function on an array, and it will say you can't do this because it's stored as the wrong type of data type, or if it's not in memory, it will say this is going to fall over before you actually try and run it. So loads of tools there to help you. Yeah, if you're feeling not quite on the ball.
Yeah. Just to answer, so I'll send out an email with a link to the slides and the video tomorrow afternoon. That's how you'll get the materials and stuff, and there'll be links in the presentation to all the plugins and stuff. So don't worry. But yeah, that's I've always wanted that, because I guess for me, my introduction to coding was Vim with Computer Science Society in the uni. It's just learn Python with Vim, and that was like my first bit. And so now, like, if I try and use anything else, I'm like, I don't know what's going on.
You're a hardcore coder. I've tried to use it. Lawrence has tried to bring me to the dark side, and I've given it a go. I hear it's quicker after about 200 hours of using it or something like this. Probably. Yeah, it's just using your time wisely, I think, and getting to know it. But yeah, if you can use it, it's written by coders for coders, isn't it? And you can program it to program, basically. So it's an incredibly powerful tool. Just not very intuitive for a first-time user or myself, who bit too tricky for me. So you don't use Vim anymore?
Well, I do, but it's just whenever I'm doing then data where I have a lot of graphs to output, then I use something like Jupyter Notebooks because it's just nice to see the output straight away. And I'm not having to open and close terminal windows and things like that.
Yeah.
But what I wondered is how did you get started into blockchain development and stuff? What's your background?
Okay. So I'm an automotive developer through training, or automotive engineer, sorry, through training. So like mechanical engineer and that sort of thing. But as engineering now goes further and further into the digital realm, I found myself using software for everyday tasks. Like you can't get around using Excel for things and writing some scripts, writing some code in VBA and automating tasks. It's kind of a very easy step on to the coding ladder is VBA because it integrates with Excel so easily. And then I found that coding was just a bit more free in terms of what you could do with it. So it's you have more freedom, more expression in terms of what you want to do. Also, the tests are much quicker than running so I was in engine development and typically run like powertrain. Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, they run fast, but waiting for results could be like a 2 or 3 hour test. And I was like, oh, okay, I could wait for this. And then if something goes wrong, you have to rerun it again. Whereas software, you just up and run and it goes. And also so I moved more and more into software during kind of my career. Moved more into data integrity, how to process data, how to automate it. And I found the reins in automotive engineering were too much. I found that because it's such an old industry, people are very hesitant to take on new ideas and new techniques. And then I found out about this cool thing called Bitcoin. I was like, oh, what's this? And then I found out about blockchains, and I found out about this whole other world about these guys who are doing, and girls, of course, like amazing developers doing these otherworldly things with this new financial tool set. And I caught the bug, and it just more and more of my time got spent researching and looking up and going to events and speaking with people about it. And then started working at XtraP about a year ago with Lawrence, just doing some things part-time. And then eventually took the leap about 6 or 9 months ago now, working full-time in the industry. And I haven't looked back. It's just such a cool, fast-moving industry. Keeping up with it is impossible. There's too many things to get going. But it's such a welcoming industry to be in as well. Everybody wants to help each other out. All of the information is out there for you to learn. You don't need to pay for you don't need to go to university. You don't need to pay thousands of pounds to learn what you need to learn. You could be the best blockchain developer in the world without ever sat in the classroom. And that's very empowering. And then I'm very lucky where I've been brought up in England and had a great education. I can get a bank account, right? But then there's this whole thing about, I am lucky, but not everyone is lucky. And I'm lucky now, but then people in Greece were lucky a couple of years ago until their economy kind of crashed. And it really wakes you up. And then once you've taken the red pill, the blue pill, once you've seen the other side, then it's very hard to look at the world the same again. And I love engineering. I love the automotive world. I love kind of fast cars and the rest of it. But this is so much more exciting. Like seeing what's going on in this realm is so much more exciting, and it moves so quickly. Like DeFi, for example. Where does it come from?
Yeah, so true. Like I feel that the pace of things, like sometimes I question, like, is this even all real? It just changes so fast,
Can I ask yourself, Brandon, like how did you get into this world?
What was it? So I guess a cousin of mine one Christmas was just like mentioned Bitcoin as a joke. I was like 12 at the time. I had no idea, right? And then I got here and I was learning how to like code just by going to some society meets, learning Python for the first time and getting introduced. Because there was this impression that, oh, if you didn't know how to code, there's no way you're getting a job coming out of Oxford, kind of, this is like you go to the careers fairs, oh, learn how to code, like, okay. And then I'm like, hello world in Python. I'm like, okay, oh, what is this? And it was like a couple of years before the big, boom and bust of the cryptocurrency craze in the media in like 2017. I think I was doing an internship in a lab, and some guys started talking about cryptocurrencies, and I was like, wait, what? Like you've heard about these things too, because not many people talk about them that much unless you're in the community, and yeah, we just started talking, and then go down kind of the Google YouTube video rabbit hole. I feel once you find this one guy, Andreas Antonopoulos, once you find his stuff,
he's a hero. He's a hero.
That's it. Like you are just set, what I mean? And yeah, I devoured, what all the videos he had on there. I read Internet Money. I'm trying to work through mastering Bitcoin at the moment. And another thing is also just having access to markets outside the UK. So having a family that comes from the Caribbean, and you can kind of see that, okay, we are kind of lucky in the UK, because I mean, even out there where everything is cash based, like electronic transactions are a completely different level, let alone cryptocurrencies. And then on top of that, having parents overseas and seeing that, oh, okay, Western Union will charge you this much money if you send, and you can't send anything less than 30 quid by a bank transfer because of the IBAN fee. And so bit by bit, I'm starting to piece this together, like, oh, so there's another way, and then that was it for me. Just
Yeah, it's cool. And would you say that knowing how cryptocurrencies work, like, do you understand how a payment gets sent?
Yeah,
it makes sense, right? I would say that you can see it in code, you can see it on a blockchain, and this is what anyone who says, oh, this crazy blockchain world, like it doesn't, Internet of Money and the rest of these weird people talking about it in these forums, like, yeah, but I understand it. And then how can you explain how money gets transferred normally? Like when you go to Western Union and you transfer that money, like even things like taking a loan out from the bank, right? They just magic it out of thin air and do all sorts of things which you can't see, you're not allowed to see, not allowed to know, not allowed to be taught about, let alone actually know about it. And like this world just makes sense, like from, again, like mechanically minded, like I can see A, B, C, like these are the steps, and if it doesn't work, it's because I've missed out a closing bracket, or like I've missed out something, and like everything is there in plain sight, and there's no question about it. And that's the cool thing, that it's the same for everyone. Like it makes sense. The payment makes sense. This is how it operates. That's not going to change. No one's going to change that unless everybody agrees that it should change for the greater good. And then it might change. You might have a hard fork or whatever else, but these things get less over time. And everything about it, even like IPFS, which I spoke about in the presentation, like it makes sense to store your data in lots of different places, and it doesn't make sense to store it in this one institute, AWS or something like this.
80% of the web on their servers or something like that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they've got I mean, like pretty much every website ever is now running on AWS, pretty much.
They're good, aren't they? Until they're not. They don't work. Like when Jeff Bezos is, he decides to turn the off switch or do something like that, and then
go to Mars maybe or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that'll be the next step. Yeah, get Elon Musk involved then.
But yeah, no, as you say, I think it's the when it's like the rules we all agree on, and there isn't like someone who gets to decide, it's we take part in the same system. And I think that was the big like light bulb moment for me, which was I did like an exchange scheme in China, and I needed to open a bank account there to get paid money, but I'm not a Chinese citizen, and my visa, you know, restricted me. And after like 5 appointments to the bank, you know, they weren't going to give me an account, and a scuffle almost broke out, not with me, but a friend I had, you know, between him and the bank teller. And you just thought, I just want to get paid money so I can eat, you know, I'm not trying to do anything bad here, you know, like, and the thing is so many people have this problem when they come to the UK from a foreign nation. I mean, even students, it's like, oh, you know, you need identification and a utility bill, and the student's like, well, I don't have an address yet. You know, how am I going to give you a utility bill? It's like, well, okay, now you need to go to, you know, this special office in the university. And that was when I was like, but why can't I just spend money that I have, and why can't other people accept it? You know, and yeah, that was a big thing, where it's essentially the rules without rulers. You know, it's the code executes, and you can't really argue with that. But yeah, sorry, before I could keep going on, like any other questions from attendees, or whether it's, you know, yeah,
related or not related.
Yeah, exactly. Hope you're all doing well over lockdown as well, because we've got some regular attendees so far. They've come to every event. Actually, everyone here, I think, has been to pretty much every event we've had so far. So
yeah, I hope there's some people from Wales who are enjoying their post-lockdown freedom as well. Yeah, nice to see Bevan as well as a mechanical engineer. Nice to see another.
Yeah. Oh, kind loyal soul.
I think it's definitely more useful and helpful in general when you're trying to solve a problem if you have a story of your own.
Yeah.
If you face that problem and you want to help other people, or you want to prevent other people from facing the same problem, I think you put your like 100% out there, and because you've truly experienced it, you might be able to develop a better solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same thing. I think when learning any new language in code as well, it's much easier to have a project, to have an end goal, to kind of blinker you and to keep you focused on why it is you're doing what you're doing. And I don't know how many languages you can write hello world in, but you know, if you're just writing hello world and everything, you don't really get a feel or a concept for it. But if you're trying to actually build something with it, and as you say, if you've got your own story, and if you've got your own drive to do it, it's much easier to pick out the bits that are important, because you can go down rabbit holes so easily. There's so much information available, and it's risky to get stuck in one particular place, spend too much time learning about something that might be interesting, but maybe isn't helping you get to where you need to get to. And yeah, these stories are, I think, becoming more and more common, with people having a reason to use it, not just an interest in using it, but actually having something that they need it for. And that's really going to drive development, I think, is people bring in their use cases, not just something made up because it's fun and pretty, but something that is going to benefit themselves, their friends, their family, the world as a whole. And that's the cool thing about open source software, right? It's not limited. And Gitcoin as well, I don't know if you've heard of Gitcoin, but it allows open source development for developers who get paid for doing work. And again, like opening up more people to get involved in helping out the whole ecosystem. Akansha, you sorry?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with your approach. The whole having a personal story and helping others is a good thing, and it generally improves lives of you and people around you. But personally, when it feels like it's too overwhelming or too big of a problem that I can't solve alone, I usually try to kind of attend hackathons and just do it on a weekend, see how it goes. It kind of helps me set up the mood. I have a deadline, I have a timeline of, okay, I need to Google this, I need to figure it out, I need to get it going.
Yeah, I miss in-person hackathons, I have to say. But yeah, I've been to a couple this year in lockdown, and it, as well as having that directive, that goal, you also have the help from all of the people offering the software, which is amazing. Like in whether it's in Slack or whether it's in Discord or wherever else they're offering information, to have direct line to the people who have offered the software out and be able to debug with them is pretty cool, pretty unique, I think. But how many hackathons have you attended, Akanksha? Are you a hackathon addict? Or
I discovered I didn't really go to hackathons until last year, but since last year I've been to at least 5 or 6.
Excellent. Have you been successful? Have you finished any of the hacks, or have you kind of just been learning and proving out ideas and
I
improving
think
your skills?
most like two to three of them were mostly about their end goal was not about winning. Their end goal was about cooperation and getting people together from different fields, like experts in different scientific fields, and having a humanitarian purpose in solving a problem for, let's say, food, mental health, all these things. So I think that was really good because I feel like mental health was ignored. So if I'm personally attached to the problem, or I feel like I've seen a lot of people in my life go through the problem, I want to solve it for them. So it just adds a little flair and helps me learn, of course. And definitely the whole idea of learning from other people who are already advanced in that area is great, because then you learn with them, you see them, and you kind of try to see that this is how you could do things much better. So that's a new learning experience. But yeah,
I was helping out with another hackathon where there was a story about, it was post-COVID hack, where someone had developed a platform and application in their team, focusing on mental health and using their own personal story to kind of drive it, and it really kind of brought it home, the fact that people are suffering, and they were using their experience in their own life to help them develop this app, which is helpful for other people, using these new technologies which are enabling them to do it. And it was kind of tracking how you feel over a period of time if you get COVID. So it was helping people track their emotions, and they get rewards for it, and then they get pointed to places where they can get help depending on the country they live in. And incredibly touching, like in terms of like a hackathon project, and in terms of something to build, rather than just building a tab for a bar or something like this, actually building something which is helpful to themselves and to other people, and really focuses them on doing this and presenting this. Really amazing. Hi
that's
from
good stuff.
nice London.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I just turned it on to say hello. It looks weird because we're sharing so much important stuff about ourselves, and then not having to see each other's faces is weird. So I was like, just say hello.
But Brandon, have you done some hackathons this year, or you've been working fully in helping this?
So I've done, how many have I done? Just two this year so far. I'm thinking about the Encode Club hackathon, but I kind of want to get my blockchain development chops a bit better for that one. So before I enter it, so I think I might do that next year. I don't know. I'm not sure, but so far the hackathons have been kind of linked to. Well, one was linked to my PhD, which was with IBM and Qiskit. So IBM have like this quantum computing open source framework, and you can use it to connect to their quantum computers and run experiments, which is quite fun.
For free, or if you're a student, maybe.
Probably. Because I guess I did sign up there. I didn't see any signs of payment anywhere, but I did sign up with a student email address. But what's nice is they do have like a few, I say a few actually, quite a lot of resources on their YouTube channel, where I've essentially been learning how to program their quantum computers. And then the other one was just a company one. So it was like, I think it was G Research. They had like, play blackjack against one of our bots and see if you can score highest. So it was a short 2-hour one. But yeah, and I know, I think Oxford hackathon's coming up this weekend as well. So that was my first hackathon ever back in like 2018. And that's where I'd say I properly learned how to code in Python, I reckon. Because yeah, before that it was just following like automate the boring stuff with Python online, you know. And I think the first like script I ever wrote that I was really happy with was it sent you the Bitcoin price like once a day to send you an email. But like the thing is like if someone else has done it, you can kind of just, you know, follow along, you know. But
kind of, but there is this I find a struggle. Like if I'm going to write a website, I tend to try and write the whole thing, whereas you got to learn to maybe just use a template and just make the content useful. So there is that whole thing of standing on shoulders of giants, right? Like all of the code that's written before us, we should try and build upon it rather than try and replicate it. But yeah, I guess if someone else has written the same code 1,000 times, it might be slightly different. And actually knowing the nuts and bolts of it all, that's really important. Right? Yeah. Why is it working the way it is?
But oh yeah, no, we're quiet in the chat. So I mean, like, if you know, Tom, you're free to head off because I don't think there are any more questions. I just to let everyone know, so the next event is tomorrow evening, same time, and I believe Lawrence is taking over for that one. Yeah, so and that'll be the last of the 4-part series. And just a reminder, talk about hackathons. So yeah, Encode Club have a hackathon, which has started officially yesterday. I guess it's a bit of a shame because they also have a welcome event tomorrow evening at the same time as Lawrence's event will be. But don't worry, you can miss that. You can catch up on YouTube. Come to our event.
Yeah.
You know, get your coding skills down before you go to the welcome event. I'd say personally. But,
yeah, get some ideas and some concepts from Lawrence, and then
yeah, exactly.
Start running.
Yeah, it's so true. And stay in touch. You know, sign up to the mailing list and everything. Once again, if anyone's not sure, the slides will be available, and this will be also available on YouTube, so you can watch it afterwards. If you missed last week's stuff, that's available on YouTube with a link to the slides, and so is the week before. We've got a few more exciting events in the pipeline, so keep posted. And I mean, really, really exciting, like quite a big one. So get ready for that. Hint, hint, wink, wink. I can't tell you now, but and before I think we sign off, once again, like massive thank you to you, Tom. Like it's great to hear not only like the knowledge stuff of how to code, you know, the getters and setters and the NodeJS and why you like VS, but like also your personal story. I think that's really inspiring because I can tell you, even for me who, you know, I code quite a bit now, I'm still scared of programming in blockchain, you know, like I'm like, oh, what if I send money to the wrong address? You know, so like it's almost like when you see it enough times, like, okay, I can do this. And you know, hearing that you went from automotive engineering to smart contracts, like I think
anyone could do it.
Exactly, you know, and the resources are there as well, you know, and so dig deep and definitely check out the Xtrapy, the foundations.xtrapy.io, I think it is, and I have a link to that as well, but that's really useful. So yeah, take care everyone. Hopefully I'll see you all tomorrow. +1s, invite your friends, parents, whoever's around. If they're interested, they can catch up quickly. And yeah, thanks again, Tom. Really
thank you so much for having me. I had great fun. And yeah, I'll send the slides out as soon as possible. Any questions, please get in touch and I'll be happy to help explain or to go yeah.
Where do you want
anything I
us
can-
to get in touch? Because like on email?
So there's my email is included in the slides, also my LinkedIn, and however you're more comfortable. To be honest, I don't mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And
Thank
worst comes to worst, like if you email me, I can forward it on to Tom if necessary. But yeah, the contact details will all be there.
Sounds great. Thank you, Brandon. And
Cool.
thanks, Tom. Wonderful talk.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. Awesome. So I guess this is the end. So farewell.
Cheers. Good evening.
Yeah. Have a good evening, Tom. Take care.
Take care. See ya. Bye bye.
See ya.